Hi, time for the edition of Simply Stated Ghost Stories here in Lake Michigan. Also, remember you can subscribe to my OnlyFans page at Deborah K on OnlyFans, DeborahKay, before we get into this episode, which I might also title Colorful Reading Books with Childish Pictures on them. I think for this episode, I want to go back to some of the events in Janesville, Wisconsin, especially what motivated me as much as anything to, and maybe even incorrectly choose at the age of 17 that I knew I was going to go down to D.C. I had been the Bucky Badger alternate state representative at that point and gotten more towards politics in the state of Wisconsin during the years of high school at Parker. And I think it was a good choice as far as like trying to solve my problems and situation. But there's some other details that you should know, and it's important to understand up front that this is probably one of the more gruesome episodes actually, because I'm going to recount some of the stuff that happened in Wisconsin, which the state still would like to hold. Um, and still can hold Endeavor WME liable for, actually, as far as trafficking. Because, well, Patricia and Cersei all founded a company with Hendrik. And one of the main events was that when I was in high school, I had a man that in my life, I thought was a short-term boyfriend. I nicknamed him Miguel, and later talked about he was basically just a guy who got into fights with Wilhelm, was basically his lover. Turned out later to be known as the actor Jared Leto. So really not a huge factor in my life as much as someone that I'd known, but I very gruesomely witnessed him being raped in public by Wilhelm. And they kept electrocuting each other with HVAC systems. It's a really disgusting, weird story. This happened out in public in Janesville. And it was so traumatizing to me that I decided I had to go down to D.C. I mean, wherever I went to college, I was going to go to the D.C. area and find out what was going on, that my own military wasn't doing anything to take care of people, and neither were the cops. And it later turned out, of course, that the Janesville police had been infiltrated by people working for Endeavor and that were part of the Russian KGB FSB. The entire situation you're seeing with Diddy today is all stuff he was trained to do by Wilhelm, who is a Russian man and looks very white. And one of the main events that occurred was that essentially Wilhelm was raping and beating up on a man you would now call Jared Leto today, but he went by a completely different name to me. And it was going on about how he was going to put me in a film. And it was a film that actually ended up being made for Tales of the Crypt. And what happened is probably one of those gruesome, disgusting stories you'll ever hear, but it's the main one that has continuously stayed in the court system because it was one of Ken Rick's productions of Buffalo Bills. And that is that day Wilhelm was beating up on the guy you know as Jared Leto and saying he was going to want me to put in the film. And I agreed to be in it, thinking it would just be like another theatrical production, many of which I'd already been in because I was a trained actress, right? And Wilhelm and Cersei said, well, no, we're going to do something else. But, well, a number of weeks later, I ended up waking up in what is essentially a shallow grave and ended up being raped by a strange person in some weird outfit that had apparently been tortured and brainwashed for weeks on end by Wilhelm. And I was wearing a strange bodice dress. And I woke up screaming, of course, because I was laying in an open grave. And there was a film crew above me filming the whole thing. And Patricia was there, running the whole thing. And it ended up being used in Tales of the Crypt. It was probably one of the more gruesome, disgusting episodes. It was a very hateful, angry episode aimed at, anyone who watches it was very much aimed at being malicious and mean to people who were even somewhat attractive. Which was an underlying, ongoing issue with both Cersei and Wilhelm and Patricia to be cruel to people that weren't of Russian ancestry who were somewhat attractive. That seemed to be all it was about. Because I was somebody who was very much inclined towards having a professional career and wanted to have one. I really wasn't interested. I had forgotten about a lot of my earlier childhood experiences with the industry and had planned to move on. And I barely even remembered the incident later. It just seemed like this bizarre gang incident. Well, the point is it was filmed by the KGB at the time. And a man who later became known in the industry as the butthole portal rapist. We'll talk about him more in another episode. But he was famous for committing anal rapes in the industry and is still alive today and free. And fairly dangerous, and works for the Russian FSB and Chinese CCP. He's still out there and alive. Really dangerous, very large man, about 6'5" and portly, really strong, and spent a lot of time stalking and terrorizing people and employing Booz Allen Hamilton to cover up his tracks. So they've been fishing and fishing for him in the U.S. government for his right to violently rape and beat people. He's also a Hollywood director. Some people think he's actually David Lynch. The point is, those days in Janesville, Wisconsin in the late 90s were pretty gruesome and really nasty. And what happened to me as a minor under the age of 18 was completely against the law and considered not just violence, there was the assault, there was the criminality of it, there was the abuse of this person that probably had dementia who appeared to have been taken from a local nursing home to film the scenes. It was an actual person who had a mental neurocognitive dysfunction, neurocognitive disorder who Wilhelm had been abusing before the scene was filmed to look like a mummy of some sort and not an actual actor. So there's like this long list of heinous crimes there the state of Wisconsin would still like to go after. And the main issue is that human trafficking in the state of Wisconsin is punishable with the dissolution of the corporation, which means the state of Wisconsin, at least, if not in a number of other states in the U.S., would actually very happily dissolve Endeavor WE, Silver Lake, their funding company, and Booz Allen Hamilton. So that's what's going on, people. As far as the Diddy parties go, I think you need to consider the fact that Beyonce actually wrote a song about putting your freakum dress on, and the songs were actually aimed at 5-year-old children. They really weren't aimed at adults, and most of what you were seeing just looked like a bunch of crazy people getting drunk and having sex and drinking Ciroc. And in reality, it was more like what happens to me with that brutal, bizarre, like rape, torture scene in the open grave. And if you're still confused about the heinousness and weirdness of the mentality of some of these people, the woman who claimed to be my sorority sister at Alpha Beta Psi at Luther College at the end of my senior year got really mad and yelled at me and said she didn't care about any white women being thrown in a grave and being raped, or even about the person that Wilhelm had tortured and emaciated and starved to film that scene. And all she wanted was scripts for her show, and she's the first today, Shonda Rhimes, who's not actually a black person. I can't imagine anything more racist and weird than the whole situation. There was no recognition of my background. And worse, when there was recognition of my background and my father's ethnicity, that he would be considered Hispanic, they simply used it as an excuse to be more rude and disgusting to me. So I'm not even sure who you would want to name this episode after. I think I'm going to call it the Tales of the Crypt episode, filmed here in Lake Michigan at the beach. I managed to find a little bit of sunny weather to try and enjoy today. It's been an extremely odd week. I moved residences, I'm changing around with regular jobs, and I'm completely exhausted. I just want to make sure I got this episode done because I know it's really important and actually pertinent to current events. And I do see the footage with, there's some legal group down in Texas I'm really leery of because they're using my mom's actual name as part of a group. And it kind of makes me uncomfortable because the woman that I named Karen, whose real name is Kendall, tried to also use my mother's name, and she tried to use the performance name. I don't want there to be any confusion between that person who is very much working for the FSB of Russia and a human rights abuser herself, and then my mom and her name. So let's remember everyone gets to keep their own names and be judged by their own behavior. I don't know if the legal group is actually named after my mom. I'm really worried that they actually are, because they're using the name Ava, and you need to be really careful about that. And that's all I have to say on this edition of Simply Stated Ghost Stories. Tales of the Crypt, a nice shot of me out on the beach and not in some weird, horrible situation. Okay.